Hey church, welcome and thank you for worshiping with us. Wherever you're worshiping, in your home or on your TV, laptop or phone, you are a part of this family. And you could watch or listen to past messages by heading to mycornerstone.family. On our sermons page, you can view playlists, search for past messages, and more. You can even listen to our content by subscribing to the Cornerstone America's podcast, which can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. I hope you enjoy the message and thank you for being a part of the Cornerstone family.
We're continuing in our series, our Imperfect Family. We all have imperfect families. Sometimes it gets really messy. And so we've been going back to Genesis, talking about some of the messy families in the first book of the Bible, talking about Abraham and his family, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and their families, and just getting into some of the mess, because it's kind of fun to look at somebody else's mess, right, instead of your own. But we're also looking at it so we can see how we can learn from their mess and make our lives better through Jesus. But today we're talking about growing pains. We're talking about growing pains. Anybody ever have growing pains when you were growing up? Did you get growing pains in your legs? Yeah. So you remember you would try to sleep at night and your legs really hurt because you had growing pains. And you'd wake up and go tell your parents, and they would say, it's okay, it's just you're growing. And so it was a good pain. The pain meant progress. So sometimes pain can mean progress if we handle it the right way. Growing pains was a good thing to have, in a sense. It means our legs were growing, our body is growing. And so Jacob, in our story that we're going to cover today with Jacob's ladder, is really a story about growing pains, and he has to grow as an individual, and so there is some pain involved in that. But here's the great thing, is that God meets us in the struggle. He stretches us in the wilderness areas of life, and he transforms us through his presence. So it's amazing what God does during these growing pain times, through these struggles that we have in life. And of course, in Jacob's situation, he caused his own problem in a sense. So he had to deal with the baggage. God was going to use him through that and get him going on the right track. So he moves from being a deceiver to a worshiper. There's a huge, really big change that goes on in Jacob's life, and this is part of the process. And so let's review real quick before we jump into this. So last week we read the story how that he stole his brother's blessing, right? He stole his brother's blessing. This is an amazing story of deception that we covered last week. And next week, we're going to get into another big story of deception where Jacob now is working 7 years for Rachel, this young lady that he wants to marry. And what does Laban do on his wedding night? He pulls the switcheroo, a bait and switch, right? Instead of getting Rachel, he gets Leah, but he does not know it on his wedding night until he wakes up in the morning. Good story. You don't want to miss this next week. And so this is the biggest bait and switch, I think, of all time. And so we'll get into that next week. The deceiver gets deceived himself, and he doesn't like it. He finds out he really doesn't like it. So anyway, so where we left off last week, he had deceived his father and his brother. He had stolen the blessing. And this is what his mother says to him in Genesis 27, verse 43 to 45. He says, now therefore, my son, obey my voice, arise, flee to my brother Laban in Haran, and stay with him a few days until your brother's fury turns away. Now he ends up staying away for like 20 years. So it wasn't just a few days, it was like 20 years, until your brother's anger turns away from you and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereaved also of you both in one day? So that's what his mother says to him. Then his father gives him similar advice. He says, then Isaac called Jacob, blessed him in chapter 28, verses 1 and 2, and charged him and said, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padam Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take yourself a wife from there of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. So Isaac also sends him away to find his wife. This is where we pick up the story in verse 10 of Genesis chapter 28. It says, Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. Now this becomes very interesting. Just a reminder, we got Jacob. We're dealing with Jacob here. Jacob, his name means supplanter. It means heel grabber. It's one who deceives. He's a manipulator, and he lives up to his name so far. He is living up to his name, and so he is grasping at control. He's striving to get the blessing in his own strength, right? He's manipulating people. And so he's not the model of integrity. A very imperfect view here of humanity, needing God's transforming grace in his life. And he leaves Beersheba, which means well of the oath. This is the place of promise. He's leaving the place of promise. He's leaving the place of covenant. He's leaving the home of his ancestors, of his family, right? Both Abraham and Isaac had been there. And he's leaving, in a sense, geographically, he's moving the wrong way. He's moving kind of out of the promised land, right? Away from his family. And he's going to move in the story from not just an inherited faith, but a personal faith that really becomes his own. And so that's what's happening here. And what's also interesting is where he's heading to is Haran. Haran means highways or crossroads. And so it's like God's taken him to Haran. He's taken him to the crossroads of life, where he's going to have to choose for himself. Who is he going to follow? Is he going to follow God, or is he going to follow his own ways? How many know that in life we get to some crossroads and we've got to choose who are we going to follow? Are we going to follow God going his direction, or are we going to go our own direction, or maybe a direction somebody else wants us to go? So in this one verse, there's a lot being told here by the writer of what is happening, not just geographically, but really spiritually, what is happening. And so really giving some insight, this is a turning point. He is fleeing, but there's going to be some godly formation that begins to happen in his life. And so this becomes a huge pivotal point in his life. So he's running, but you can't run from God. God shows up and deals with him. So we're talking about growing pains, talking about how God uses struggle to grow our faith. And we see that in Jacob's life. He's going to hit this wilderness. Many times the wilderness is a classroom. It's a place that we learn. It's a place where distractions are stripped away from us. Some of the comforts are taken away from us. And it really sets the stage for an encounter with God. And that's what happens here. So growth happens many times when some of these distractions and some of the things we've been trusting in and leaning on are removed. We're out of our comfort zone. And then all that we have basically is God. And so we start trusting him. And then he shows up in a big way. So, all right, so let's keep going. Genesis 28, verse 11. It says here, when he reached a certain place, we're talking about God grows us in the wilderness. He says he reached out to a certain place and he stopped for the night because the sun had set. So I love this too, just the way this is written. When he reached a certain place, we don't have a name of it. He doesn't give us a name. He leaves it unnamed purposefully. And literally in the Hebrew it says he reached the place. It's an uncertain place. And God takes these uncertain places, or the place where he wants to meet with us. He has a way of getting us into that place where then we are receptive to receive and hear from him. So I love the way this is written. When he reached a certain place, this certain place becomes a holy place. It becomes an altar. It becomes a place of change for him. And he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Now, geographically, it's true. It was getting late. The sun had gone down. He stopped for the night. But also, I think this is kind of setting the stage for where he is spiritually, kind of where he is relationally. He's all alone. He's fled from his family. He's running from his brother, running from his dad, basically, in a sense. And he's in the dark night of the soul. He's in this dark place where he's all alone. He's been given the blessing because he cheated the system to get it, but he's left home with none of the blessing. He's left home with nothing. He's got nothing. When he should have the blessing. He should have a lot of material goods. So when he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Look at this. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He's got nothing. You know, he's got a stone for a pillow. That's what he's got. He's got nothing. Anybody want to sleep on a pillow? I don't want to sleep on a pillow. But the insight here is he has nothing. This is a dark moment for him. He stopped for the night, sunset. It's a dark moment. But sometimes God lets the sun set on one season so he can reveal the next season to you. There's a transition that's going on in his life. Sometimes there's transitions going on in our life where God allows the sun set on one season of our life because he's getting ready to bring forth a new season in our life. And that's what symbolizes what's being written here. This is what's happening. It's amazing time. So he grabs the stone. He's got nothing. He lays his head down. He goes to sleep, right? And so this is the picture starting out for what's about to happen. Growing pains, how God uses the wilderness to get our attention. Sometimes when we have nothing, then we know we have him. So my second point here, talking about growing pains, is God grows us in his presence. God shows up in this wilderness and begins to change him. When we find ourselves in the wilderness, when we find ourselves with nothing to lean on but God, and we start moving towards him, or really he starts moving towards us, and we encounter him in this wilderness. And he has this vision, he has this dream, and God speaks to him through this. And we see this in verse 12. He said he had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching up to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it, as I had mentioned earlier in the transition. So you have this stairway or this ramp, and he sees that heaven and earth are connected, and angels ascending and descending on, that God is busy, God is working, and maybe he hasn't realized that God has been working, but behind the scenes, God has been working, and he didn't even know it. I love this. I think the idea of the angels ascending and descending is that God has been present this whole time, but he's not been aware of it. God has been working on his behalf this whole time, but he was not aware of it. How many times that we've been thinking we're alone, we're by ourselves. God, where are you? And the whole time, something we realize he's been with us this whole time. He's been leading us or guiding us or protecting us, or he has us right where he wants us. God grows us in his presence. So he had this dream in which he saw a stairway resting on earth with his top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on. So he has this vision, this idea of reconciliation, that heaven and earth are connected, this revelation that God is revealing himself to this runaway, and that relationship that God is drawing near to him, not pushing him away, but God is drawing near. Now, one thing I do have to mention why we're here is that Jesus makes a very similar statement here in John chapter 1, verse 51. Jesus said this, he said, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. He's saying ascending and descending on me. So Jesus uses this very same words basically to describe what's happening in his ministry, in his life. Basically saying, you've heard of Jacob's ladder. He goes, I am the ladder that's going to connect heaven and earth permanently. And so Jesus uses, I love this. And if we had more time, we could dig into that whole story with Nathaniel and what happens there. But let's continue with Jacob's dream here, Genesis 28, 13 and 14. There above it stood the Lord. So the Lord is at the top, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac, and I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. This is becoming very personal. Before it was the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac. Now it's going to become the God of Jacob. He says the Lord was standing above it. I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. And now he says, I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. His faith isn't inherited anymore. It's becoming very personal. God has brought him in and says, you are part of something bigger than just you here. He says, verse 14, your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. All peoples of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Man, this just hit home for Jacob. He has a renewed identity. He has a renewed purpose. All of this is happening in the presence of God. I tell you, when we get into the presence of God, things change. We understand that God is working on our behalf. He gives us purpose. He gives us a new identity. He has a plan for our lives. And here's the thing, that Jacob had tried to steal the blessing, and here God is giving it to him. There's a growth that's going to happen in Jacob because of this. He's not trying to work for it. He's not trying to steal it anymore. He's not manipulating for it. He's out in this wilderness all by himself with nothing. And God says, now I can give it to you because you're not trying to steal it. You're not trying to take it. You're not trying to manipulate for it. You've got nothing else but me, and I will give you the promise. Man, this is a huge time for Jacob. Let's keep going with this dream that he has. And God says to him, I will be with you and will watch over you wherever you go. This is good news. Here's what's happening here. It isn't just what God gives us, but he gives us himself. It's not just something that God gives us, not that he gives us a promise, but he gives us himself. He says, I will be with you. We don't want God to just take care of it. We don't want just his provision or his protection. We want him to be with us. I got a lot of respect for Moses because Moses stopped and said, God said, hey, you guys go on ahead. I'm going to stay back here. I'm not going with you anymore because things, the way the children of Israel were acting. And Moses said, if you're not going, I'm not going. Moses understood the power of his presence, the importance of relationship, the importance of knowing him. It wasn't just about his provision or his miracles. It was about knowing his ways, knowing him. That's what this part of the presence is. God grows us through his presence, that we get to know him. It's not about just what he could do for us or what he gives us, but it's about his very presence just being with us and us being with him. He says, I am with you. No matter where he's going, into this exile, into this wilderness, his future is unsecure. He doesn't know what's going to happen. God says, I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have done all that I've promised you. And he says, what I've started, I'm going to finish. That's what he's saying. He's not saying, like, I'm going to leave you once this is done. He said, no, the promise is, it's a guarantee. What I've started in you, I am going to finish. This is the way God works. This is his faithfulness, that he is with us. Jacob has this lasting assurance that God is with him. No matter what he's about to face, God is with him. And I imagine maybe the fear that he had in this journey going forward, now faith is starting to fill his heart and his mind. God's presence changes Jacob from this fugitive that is running from the past to a man that is now walking in his destiny. This is what happens when we hang out with God. We may be running from something. We may be a fugitive. God takes us and he gives us a destiny and gets us moving in the right direction. The power of his presence, God's faithfulness doesn't end at our failures. Just because Jacob had failed big was not the end of what God wanted to do in his life. This is the amazing thing about Jacob in his life, what God does here. Growing pains. We're talking about how God uses struggle to grow our faith. God grows us through the wilderness. We get into these wilderness situations or seasons even of our life where it seems like all our comforts have been pulled out away from us. We're kind of, in a sense, forced to trust God. And then God grows us through his presence in that wilderness. We get to know him. We make a better connection with him because we're not distracted and pulled in a lot of different directions. God changes us through his presence. And then God grows us when we walk by faith. At some point, we got to start taking some steps of faith. And we see that in verse 16. When Jacob awoke from the sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. Surely the Lord is in this place, and it's like God had been working on his behalf, but he was not aware of it. And now he is realizing God is here. He's not just having a physical waking here, he is having a spiritual awakening. That is what's happening in Jacob's life. He had kind of been asleep to the things of God, and now he is waking up to the things of God and getting his kind of priorities in the right line, and now he's ready to start stepping out in faith. He says, when Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. A.W. Tozer says this, very interesting what he says about God's presence. He says, the presence of God is the central fact of Christianity. The only difference is that some are more aware of it than others. Could that be true? I think this is true. I really feel the presence of God is the central fact of Christianity, that through Jesus, we have access into the throne of God, that we have access to his presence, that God is with us. He lives inside of us. And maybe the only difference is some of us are tuned in a little bit more than others. Are we tuning into God's presence? Are we tuning into him, no matter what the circumstance or situation is that we're facing? Looking to him for direction, for guidance? Or are we trying to figure it all out on ourselves? We try to figure it out ourselves. We're Americans. We like to figure it out on our own. I know. I'm there too. I struggle with the same thing. You guys know, years ago, I told this illustration, and I'll do it today. So guys on the cameras, when I walk around up here, I throw them off. So you might want to go to widescreen just in case. But you got a filing cabinet here. And it's like the filing cabinet is our mind. You got the 4 drawers, the metal 4 drawers that are upright, and you open up the first drawer, and those drawers are pretty long, and you start going through the files. You're looking for the answer to your situation, the answer for your life. And you're looking at it, you're not finding it. You close that drawer, it's like tax documents, right, guys? You open it up, you're looking, you can't find that one tax, you've got to have this document. And you'll go through those drawers, and after you've looked through all 4 drawers and you've scoured them, you will go back through the same drawers. Maybe I missed it. And you'll go back through it, and this is what we do with circumstances, situations. Instead of looking to God, we start going through the filing cabinet of our mind, looking for answers. And when we didn't find it the first time through, we go a second time, and a third time, and a fourth time. And sometimes those drawers get pretty long. You open up that drawer, and sometimes you open up that drawer, and it'll go all the way across the room. Our minds hold a lot of stuff, and then you keep going through the files. And you know, when you can't find that thing, eventually you'll take the files out. You're desperate. You'll take the files out and you throw them down on the floor. You'll throw them out on the table. You'll spread them out all over the place. Papers, still looking for the answer. But it's not there. There's no answer there. And the way we do this is like Jacob, the way he had done his life, and he had tried the filing cabinet of his mind. How can I figure this out? How can I make this happen? I'm going to make this work. I'm going to steal. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to manipulate. Instead of closing the filing cabinet doors and say, yeah, there's a lot of files to go through, but I'm going to turn towards God and say, God, what do you want me to do? Leave the filing cabinet there. A.W. Tozer, the presence of God is the central fact of Christianity. The only difference is that some are more aware of it than others. Verse 17, it says, he was afraid and said, now this is not, I don't think he was fearful, he was afraid, but I think this is a sense of awe. He was awestruck by the presence of God. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Man, this is huge. How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. He now has an awareness of God's presence. It's the gate of heaven. God is working and moving on his behalf. This is no ordinary place. Verse 18, early the next morning, Jacob took the stone. Notice he doesn't waste any time. It's early the next morning. He's ready to step out in faith. He's ready to move now. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone that he had placed under his head, and he set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. So now it's becoming this place of worship. What he'd used this rock for a pillow, now he's making a pillar out of as a place for worship. He's putting oil on it, setting it aside, consecrating it for God's use. This is a place of worship. This is the house of God. This is a place of worship now. This place of loneliness, this place of fleeing, this place in the wilderness has now become a place of worship. And that's what God does. He takes these circumstances that we have that kind of pushed us into this wilderness. And this wilderness, if we allow God to work and move in our heart, becomes this place of worship. It becomes this wonderful place where we find him, where we meet with him, where we get his guidance, his direction, his hope, and encouragement. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone, placed it under his head, set it up as a pillar, poured oil on top of it, and he called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Bethel means house of God. This became a special place for him. This place in the wilderness now became a special place for Jacob, a place of worship. All right, let's go to verse 20. Then Jacob made a vow. So now he's making a vow. I think this is the first vow we have in Scripture, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and he will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone I will have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. Now, this becomes interesting. There's two ways to look at this. Some people look at this and say, well, it sounds like he's doubting, like, God, if you do this, then I will do that. Others look at this vow as just being really just a straightforward step of faith for him, that there's no strings attached, but he's just confessing what God has already promised him. I would see it also in that second light there, that I think he's just making a confession of faith here, that he's going to take this journey, he's going to follow God, and God's going to work in his life. Interesting here that he says, I will give you a tenth of everything. So this is one of the first places we have a tithe being given. I think we see it with Abraham also, and I could point out a few other places. But it's interesting that generosity has hit him because God has entered into a situation and he's had this encounter with him. There's this generosity. He says, I'm going to take a tenth of all my increase, and now, God, I'm going to give it to you. C.S. Lewis said there were like 3 conversions, one of the heart, one of the mind, and one of the pocketbook. And he said, somebody really has been changed by God when they become generous with what they have. I think this was life-changing for him. He became generous with what he had. He promised to give a tenth to the Lord. And this became personal. This was now his faith. It wasn't the faith of his father or his grandfather. It now became his faith, and he was ready for this journey that God had him on. Pretty amazing. This stone that was a pillow now is becoming a worship place. Generosity flows from gratitude. God was changing his life. taking steps of faith, ready for the future. Faith transforms fear into worship. Faith turns encounters into commitments. He wasn't just having an encounter with God, but he was moving out in commitment. Man, when we really connect with God, there should be a change that comes forth from our life in the way that we live. He was ready to trust God with that. Let's get ready to close in prayer this morning. If you guys would stand with me. We're talking about growing pains, how God uses struggle to grow our faith. God grows us in the wilderness. Are you in a wilderness or a certain area of your life in a wilderness? I think that's legitimate too. Maybe not our whole life is in a wilderness, but certain areas of our life may be in a wilderness. Are we trusting God in that wilderness season? Are we looking to him? Are we looking to the file cabinet of our mind trying to figure out the answer? Or have we shut the file cabinet and we're looking to God? God grows us through wilderness. He also grows us through his presence. Are we tapping into his presence? This is why the disciplines, the Christian disciplines become so important, of reading our Bibles, of praying, of spending time with other believers. Because as we spend time in God's presence, he changes us. I don't think you can hang out with the creator of the world, the creator of the universe, and not be changed by his presence. If we simply get influenced by people around us, and we know that we do, right? We know that you hang around with somebody who says a certain word and then you start saying it. We're influenced so easily by the people around us. If we get around God, we will be influenced by him. It makes change so much easier. We're not trying to make it happen. His influence is just rubbing off in our life. God grows us in his presence. God also grows us when we walk by faith, when we take steps of faith. And taking steps of faith is a requirement. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. So at some point, we have to take steps of faith. Where is God asking you to take a step of faith and trust him in? Are you taking that step of faith? Here's the thing, and I think some of this wilderness experience, I think some of the wilderness experiences of life can be avoided. Like, if Jacob would have just from the beginning decided not to deceive, I think he could have avoided a lot of the mess that he had in his life. But because he didn't, he got put into the wilderness. And then he connected with God. And then he started taking steps of faith. Here's what I find easier. In an attempt to kind of miss the wilderness, just connect with God first. Do what's right, take steps of faith. Life gets a whole lot easier. I don't think you can avoid every wilderness, but I think you can avoid some of the wilderness. Some of the wilderness problems we face is because we chose certain things that weren't good choices. That's why connect with God first. Make decisions, move out in faith. Saves us a lot of headache down the road. I don't know about you, but I like to avoid headaches. You guys like to avoid headaches? That's why connect with God first. Try to avoid that wilderness. If you have to go through it anyways, go through it. Nonetheless, God will be with you. Are you guys with me this morning? What do you need to do this morning? What's your next step? Is it reconnecting with him in a wilderness? Is it just connecting with him? Decisions that need to be made? Is it a step of faith? You know that he's been tugging on your heart to do something. You need to be obedient.